Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started this evening. First of all, thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedules to join us tonight for what should be a very interesting and not necessarily our easiest topic, but very important to USA Hockey and really society as a whole right now. And it's something that we're looking forward to discussing with a very strong group of panelists tonight as well. My name is Matt Leaf. I'm the director of the Officiating Education Program for USA Hockey, and I'll be your moderator for tonight. And very excited to be joined by a group of panelists. First of all, our executive director for USA Hockey, Mr. Pat Kelleher. Pat, welcome and thanks for joining us tonight. Is there a few things you want to start out with?
Oh, thanks, Matt. A pleasure to be here. Appreciate the invite. I don't get invited on all the Zoomcasts, so it's a pleasure to be here and thrilled to be with this group and look forward to a great discussion tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Pat. Our second panelist is our Director of Diversity and Inclusion for USA Hockey. I think in her second or third year now, Stephanie Jackson. Stephanie, welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt, for having me. And I'm excited to be here and be with everyone and to have been asked to be part of this. I'm very grateful. And Matt, I also just want to say thank you to you. You've given me so much support over the past year, you and your entire team. So I'm glad to be with everyone tonight.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. And finally, our third panelist, Gui Bradshaw. He's currently a vice president with our Mid-Am affiliate. He's also a local supervisor of officials for the state of Ohio, based in the Cleveland area, and has been a long-time, 15-plus years official, coach, and pretty much involved in all aspects of USA Hockey now. So, Guy, thanks for taking some time and joining us tonight as well.
Well, Matt, thank you. I appreciate the invite. I'm excited to be here. It's an important topic that I'm passionate about, and I look forward to a great discussion with the group.
Fantastic. Thanks, Guy. Okay, again, welcome to those who have joined us. If you do have a question throughout the session, please feel free to use the Q&A function that's at the bottom of your screen. You can type in a question at any time, and we have a few topics that we want to make sure that we cover tonight, but I'll also be monitoring the questions coming in and sharing some of those questions with our panelists as well. As with all of our Zoomcasts, we start out with a little poll to gather some information from our membership or from the people that are participating, so we get a better idea in terms of what our audience is doing and some of their experiences and those types of things. So right now I'm launching a poll. There's 4 questions. I want you to go ahead and take your time, read through them carefully, and go ahead and answer each one. And after you have answered each one of the 4 questions, there'll be a button down at the bottom where you can submit your poll, and then we'll share the results and get started with our program tonight. Okay, looks like we almost have everyone here, so I'm going to go ahead and end the polling and share the results. Okay, fantastic. We have a very, very knowledgeable group here tonight, Stephanie. The first question was, diversity, equity, and inclusion is important to USA Hockey in order to make sure groups that are not the majority have the opportunity to participate, advance, and be acknowledged for their presence and contributions to hockey without harm. 100% of our audience felt that that was a true statement. So we're off to a very good start, and I think that's the first poll question we've had 100% compliance on, and this is our 10th Zoomcast so far, so that's a good thing. Question number 2, did you participate in games during the past season that included diversity within the group of participants, considering differences in race, gender, co-ed games, sexual orientation, and disability? 83% of our respondents tonight said yes, that they did. 4% basically no, and then there's roughly 13% or 3 of our participants that are not an official, so it did not necessarily apply to them. Question number 3, are you aware of the President's directive issued November 1st, 2019 that addresses hateful or discriminatory language. Another bingo where 100% are all aware, and that's a great thing too, because obviously we faced quite a few challenges in terms of getting that information out and making sure that everyone is aware of that directive. And finally, question number 4, have you been involved in a game where a penalty has been required for the use of hateful, discriminatory, or offensive language? 25% said yes. 63% are no, and again, our 13% where 3 participants are not officials. So again, there's about 25% of the people participating have had that situation occur probably sometime here in the last couple of seasons. So thank you very much for taking that time and sharing some feedback with us. That's important for USA Hockey to be able to gather some of that information, and is something that we take very, very seriously. So with that, I want to get started, and I'm going to put Stephanie on the spot right off the bat here. It sounds like we have a knowledgeable group, but I think it would be important for them to hear from you what exactly is the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how is it relevant to USA Hockey, and why is it important? And for someone that deals with this on a day-to-day basis, I think what you can share with our audience would be very valuable to them.
Yeah, awesome, Matt. Thank you. And you're so right. We do have a very knowledgeable group. And really, just in a nutshell, first starting off with diversity. Diversity means anything that is different from a normal setting. So for us here in hockey, we know that historically here in the US, hockey has been a sport for people who identify as white and people who identify as male. And so for us, diversity is going to be anyone that isn't that. So that means anyone who identifies as female or a person of color. It also expands even to your ability, whether it's a disability or adaptive. Also how you identify yourself. So if you're LGBTQ, it can be veteran status, it can be lots of different things, but I try to tell people diversity means when you go into a setting and you're not the norm there. And so secondly, equity. Equity is purely about fairness. It's about opportunity as well as opportunities being fair, people being treated similarly in the same way, and people also being catered to in terms of making sure that they can be involved and that they won't be put on the margin just because they are different. And inclusion has everything to do with, can a person's voice be heard? Are they able to advance? And in their advancement, are they able to thrive? And so all 3 of those things are very important to our hockey world as a whole, but more specifically for USA Hockey, because we want people to know that this is a space for anyone that truly wants to be here. And that is a really, really, really big statement, but I think it's a statement that we are committed to, and I think we have shown, especially over this past year, that we want to be a place that promotes people being able to thrive and people being able to advance and people feel like there is a place for them here. So that is the reason why diversity, equity, and inclusion is really important anywhere, but especially for us at USA Hockey.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. Guy, with your
Yes.
experiences as a player, coach, official, and now you're administrator with the affiliate and local supervisor, what are some of the challenges that you have faced in hockey, and have there ever been a moment or certain situations where you haven't necessarily felt welcome?
Absolutely. For my personal experiences, going back to playing, I experienced some things being said to me as a player that, were very uncomfortable. I'll be honest with you about that. I had the luxury for several years of my youth playing career of having my father as a coach, which allowed me to have somebody that I could identify with, that I could talk to about it. And that was very important in my formative years. As I got older into my teen years and went away to played at a different location, he wasn't there, but you know, there were still the occasions where the experiences happened. And you know, the unfortunate thing is that's a very lonely time for somebody who is on the receiving end of that sort of language. And it's a hard thing to necessarily talk to people who may have never experienced that. So that's part of the challenge on both sides when you're dealing with these sorts of issues. You know, I have the work schedule of being a teacher, so in the summers I normally work at hockey camps, and there's a female coach who I work with frequently. This year we didn't have our USA camps and whatnot, but you know, she's had some similar experiences when we get a bunch of teenage boys in, and they aren't necessarily, you know, understanding that this is a coach who has the skills and is able to help you and deserves X respect, you know, as being there as a coach. And then she gets them out on the ice and puts them in some power skating drills, and they're like, wow, you know, like the jaws drop. You know, she knows what she's doing. So she and I have had some similar experiences with regards to that. But I've also had some wonderful experiences with USA Hockey, some opportunities that I've been given both on the ice as an official and off the ice. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. At this point now, as I've gotten involved with the administrative side, my hope is to help educate and inform all so that the next hockey player and the next hockey player, whatever their background, he or she doesn't have the experiences that I had for part of my time and that are still unfortunately going on for some of our participants today.
Okay, thanks, Guy, and that's great. And just to add another accolade, I guess, to the positive experience, I know that you served as camp director for our Western Futures out in Colorado Springs recently within the last couple of years, and the rave reviews that I got, I was out of the country at the time, but when I came back, there was quite a bit of excitement around the office with some of the player development people in terms of our camp director and the work that he did that week. So thank you very much for that willingness and ability to volunteer to something that's a pretty grueling week, as you know.
Absolutely, but a fun one.
Yeah, great. Pat, the NHL has obviously taken an active role in Hockey is for Everyone, that mantra in promoting diversity and participation. You know, if you watch the playoffs right now on the ticker and over on the side, you got the YouTube Hockey Culture channel and the presentation that they're constantly pushing. How have they supported USA Hockey and partnered with us to address our efforts as it relates to diversity and inclusion?
Well, as you well know, Lee, the NHL has been an incredible partner in every facet of the game for us. And this is no different with diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have been fortunate over the past several years to help to really, I think, be pushed in a very good way by the NHL to be more active. Certainly meetings in the past with Kim Davis of the NHL to help us continue to move forward. The Hockey is for Everyone programming and those programs themselves have been around, you know, since the early 90s. I mean, the programs may be even further, but Hockey is for Everyone, or it was diversity programs. They've been around since the early 90s. The NHL and USA Hockey have been partners in a lot of these places to provide funding and resource and events that have helped primarily inner city kids get on the ice and play our game. I think now as we continue to move, it's what's next can we, NHL and USA Hockey, do for hockey across the country. Obviously, the NHL looks at Canada as well, where we're certainly just concerned with the US, but they continue to provide support. I know they provide a great deal of support for Stephanie and any of the programs that we do. They provide advice in some cases. They provide resources to us that we're able to apply and help with partnerships. I think we have some groups that we've worked with, and Stephanie's led the way on a couple of initiatives that we're rolling out really right about now for some executive education and volunteer leadership education, as well as education on diversity, equity, inclusion for the grassroots through RISE. And those are people that we've come in contact with quite a bit at the NHL. And so I think they've helped get us moving in certain cases. And certainly Stephanie and the group that she's worked with and the diversity task force have kind of picked these things up and really helped us move at a pretty good pace over the past year, knowing that we still have a long way to go and a lot of work to do.
Okay, great. Thanks, Pat. Stephanie, it's obviously been a very unusual last 5 months with the COVID pandemic, and we've certainly faced, as a country and even the world, has faced quite a bit of challenges in creating awareness over some racial injustices, and the Black Lives Matter movement is certainly front and center. How's that impacted your job as a director of diversity and inclusion? Has it made it a little bit more difficult? Has it made it easier? What's your general sense in how that's impacted you and USA Hockey?
Yeah, I think in terms of how this has impacted my role here at USA Hockey is it's really sparked people to ask more questions. And I tell people all the time, if you don't ask questions about something that you don't know anything about, then you're almost saying that you accept being misinformed. And so I think that with everything that we've been seeing the last couple of months, I've received calls from people that maybe before didn't really want to talk to me that much or didn't really feel as though they had a need to engage with me at all. So it has been the catalyst for a lot of people to figure out what their place is within this space of hockey, especially as these things are going on. And so I think that while I will say that with my role, there are not necessarily easy parts. I think the easiest parts are, getting to work with people like yourself, Matt, and your team, and some of our members and the staff. But I think that the difficulty lies in trying to express how we will use what is going on in the world to make us better in hockey. And so I think that through constant conversation, through the openness and willingness to ask questions, and being okay with saying, you know what, I don't really know what I think about that, but I'm not going to walk away or be timid or be afraid of it, has been one of the positives, I think, that has come out of the last couple of months, especially with our hockey community.
Yeah, that's great. And kind of sort of as a follow-up is obviously the Black Lives Matter has been front and center, as I said. But we also have a fairly diverse group of Asian participants, Hispanics, and many other immigrants, because we are an immigrant country, from various other countries and races and those types of things. So how do we engage them as well? And I think it's safe to say that with the COVID-19 situation, our Asian community may be facing some additional challenges along those lines. How do we engage them, and how do we protect and make them feel welcome as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think cultural competency is key, but one of the best ways to build up that competency is to engage as much as you can with people that are different from yourself. You bring up the Black Lives Matter movement, but what I would like to say is that just as we have a movement in Black Lives Matter that does cause people to think about the Black experience, Asian Americans have an experience, Hispanic Americans have an experience, every culture has an experience. And to know what pertains to those specific experiences, you have to not be afraid to engage with those communities. And so I think that the biggest thing is engagement, being willing to put yourself in a space where you are up close and up front and center with a different culture, and you're asking questions and you're asking them about their specific experience. And that is the best way, I think, to get a clear view of the issues that people in different backgrounds face daily.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's some very good advice there. And that kind of sort of transitions to what I would like to ask Guy next too is, we as coaches and officials, we obviously have an impact on the environment that's created, at least during the game situation. Coaches more so with practices, off ice, and everything else that's going on. And one of the things when we prep for these things, we exchange some emails and some ideas. And one of the things that you had mentioned in your email that really kind of sort of resonated with me is when you're different, sometimes you go out there and we have a challenge of making them feel welcome, of making them feel part of our participation and part of our game versus simply feeling that they're on display because they're different than everyone else that happens to be on that ice. Sure. What can we do, or what's your advice as a coach or as an official, and how we can contribute to that welcoming environment and really making those people that are not the majority, so to speak, or the minority feel like they're part of our programs as well?
Well, thanks, Matt. That's a very good question. I feel like I have the benefit of working in education as my career, because what I've learned is that the more you invest into a relationship, especially with young people, the more that they're going to respond and the more that they're going to trust you, accept what you're saying to them, and the better that you can support each other in that relationship. So I would say that for coaches, it's about investment into those players. It's about asking them some questions instead of just going through do the drill. Sometimes just get a little bonus question that lets them know, hey, this coach cares about my opinion. So you can ask, what drills did you like from today's practice? Or, follow up a game and ask, how did you like playing with your line mates? Very simple things that just show a little bit more personal engagement. And, similarly, you can take that because sometimes it's the entire family. If you have, a black family that's the only one in on a team, or a Hispanic family, or a family of Asian descent that's the only one on the team, mom and dad, they may feel it as well and have some questions. And so, a coach, just taking a little extra time, doesn't have to be a formal invite them to dinner, but, just a little extra time with them will go a long way to building that relationship, making them feel welcome. And I would even say, sometimes, especially if it's family, don't even do it at the rink. Just pick up the phone and give them that call. Because at the rink now it looks like, like you said, okay, here's the coach walking over to this family and is talking with them, and I wonder what the issue is here. Whereas make that phone call, they're going to feel that there's a personal investment in it. The thing I would say to officials is it's the same as, when you're out on the ice for any other game. Who do we talk to? We talk to the goalie, right? Because they're alone, they're different, So you go up and say, "Hey, goalie, how you doing?" Or if they're getting shelled one day, "Hey, that was a good save on the one that you got." I mean, you don't say it's the one that you got, but you do that little extra to help them feel engaged in it. And so, I'll do things like ask a player, "Hey, what do you think of the ice today?" And anything like, "Hey, you ready to play?" Just little quick things that show an interaction with them, and nobody sees it as you're singling out this player and having a long conversation. As players get older, I'll ask them, "Hey, what do you want to do with the game? Are you interested in playing midgets and juniors, or who's your NHL hero?" Anything like that. Quick things that show that there's a little bit of personal touch to it, is what I would say.
Excellent advice. Very, very good. Pat, the President's Directive on Hateful Language came out mid-season last year, which is, as you know, you've been around long enough to realize that that's fairly unprecedented within USA Hockey. Can you explain a little bit about what was the evolution of that directive, and also what's the results? What's the general feeling and from leadership on the results of the directive?
I think that came around as a product of a lot of conversations. Some of them were within our groups and led by Stephanie and others that just talking more about these issues brings them to the surface more. But really, I think I'd give it kind of a two-pronged approach on really where we got to, where our president, Jim Smith, felt that it had to be done and had to be done at that time. I think one is that more and more reports were coming in through various channels to us to say this happened, or this was something that happened at this rink, and it either didn't get reported or it didn't get handled the way people may have felt that it should have. And just hateful things, hateful language, and words and terms that have no place in society, never mind within a youth hockey or environment or an ice rink. So we were getting more of those, and just when you hear any of those things, you feel for the people involved, right? Like, no one should be subjected to that when they come into I'll say a youth hockey environment. We know some of this happens in adult hockey as well, but primarily for kids, like they shouldn't have to deal with that when they come to the rink. They shouldn't have to deal with it anywhere, but when they come to the rink, we have to do what we can to have an impact on society through hockey. I think that's one. The second part goes to your earlier question, Matt, about the NHL. We have regular communication with lots of people at the NHL, and I was in a meeting in New York with the commissioner, and Gary Bettman was pretty clear with me to say, listen, we have to do something to make this better across our sport. And it was before a couple of incidents at the NHL level. It was before that. But things, Gary had heard some things that are coming back to him from the youth hockey or the rink side of it. And he was clear that, in a way that's pushing us, but helping us to say, listen, we have to do something here. And so from those conversations, Jim Smith and I had it back, and certainly some input from Stephanie and others and I think Stephanie's done a really good job with this for us to say, listen, we've done a lot of good things, but sometimes, and I'll take a little liberty, sometimes you have to kind of shock the system a little bit, right? So sometimes you have to really take a stand. And I think having that presidential directive come out during the season last year was difficult, as you well know, Matt, because you had to manage a lot of that with the officials and getting the word out. But it was also, I think, probably more impactful being done in that manner. Sometimes you gotta shake the trees a little bit, right? You have to a shock to the system, and I think that coming out at that time had an effect that was intended to say, listen, we've talked about this. We've said that this isn't your group, Matt, has made rule changes to that effect over the years, but to have it come out to say, hey, we have to stand up for this right now during the season, be proactive, maybe step outside of the way we normally do things to show that this cannot be tolerated in our game. It just can't be. And so that's were a lot of things that was behind that got us there to make that happen in the end of October, early November last year. And I think from that side of it, we keep saying we want to eradicate this from our game, and that'll always be the goal. Did it accomplish that goal? Not yet. But I think it did a lot, and I think it put it out there to a lot of our members, hopefully our officials, our families, that this is something that cannot be part of our game, that it just has to go away. And I think one of the things that I've learned from some of my conversations with Stephanie is just, the impact it has on the player and the family who may be the target or the victim in this situation of the language is profound. And, we talk about hockey as should be the greatest youth sports experience for anybody. And if we have that happening where it's profound in the opposite direction, that just can't be part of our sport or part of USA Hockey. So the results, I think, are going the right way. We'll still have a lot of work to do, and it's a societal issue. But I think we can do things within hockey to impact society through our sport. And ultimately, I think that's, we want the, as I like to say, the experience for hockey for everybody to be the best that it can be, so that they love our game, because we all love our game. And we want to pass it on and share it with more people. And if we can do it knowing that we're protecting everybody to the best of our ability, I think it helps us share the game even more.
Yep. Stephanie, have you gotten some feedback from our affiliates and from some of the volunteers that you work with? What's their general thoughts?
Yeah, definitely, Matt. I've had numerous conversations about the directive. I think that for the most part, people have also embraced it and felt that it was a necessary thing for USA Hockey to do. Um, but what I will say is I think that people still have to adjust to the fact that it is something that we do have in place to make sure that everybody does feel like they belong and that people don't have to walk away from the ice and their playing experience with any kind of trauma. So I will say that the feedback has been good. I would say also too that it sparked more conversation about why it works and why it doesn't work. And I think that those things are really great for our leadership to know so that every year we can get better and better and better with this. I think, as Pat just said, our goal is to eradicate this stuff from our game. And the only way that we can do that is if we keep collecting the data about how the directive works and how it doesn't work so that we can make sure that these vulnerable families are protected. So overall, I think the feedback has been definitely great, and it's been really, really helpful for us as we move forward with transformation.
Yep, but we still certainly have some more work to do though, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Okay, I'm going to go off the script here for a second. We got a question from the audience. And probably I think I'm going to steer this towards Guy, but anyone else can weigh in if you want.
Okay.
And Guy might have the experience from being on the ice, but in order for a 601E3 to be assessed, does the official need to understand the language that the insult was uttered? And the question is, he was in a 10U game. A player started screaming at another player in what they felt or they believed was either a Slavic or a Russian type language. The official heard it, but obviously didn't understand what was being said. And then it was reported to him by another player that what that player was saying wasn't appropriate and probably fits under there. He obviously, he didn't understand, so he couldn't go back and penalize the player. Where does the official go from there in that particular situation? And how do we accomplish what we're trying to accomplish in dealing with that type of unique situation?
That is a unique one. I've done a few games where players were speaking in different languages, and you definitely, if you don't know the language, you can't apply a ruling on something that, could have just been yelling, "Pass me the puck." Doubtful that was the case here. But to me, the avenue that you would follow in that sort of a situation is speaking to the coach of the team, and letting the coach know, here's what's been reported to me. Encourage them to speak to their team about it. If you can identify the player who said it, encourage them to speak to that player about it. And, at this point, we have all of this technology. The incident report can be filed, and just explaining what basically you read off, Matt, in the email, and that, at least starts a paper trail. So if 2 weeks later, another official is told similar things about the same team and they file an incident report, now we've got two. By the third time it happens, now we've got some real question marks, and there's cause to speak to the coaches, speak to the team, and find out, what's going on here, why are we having this problem, and further work to remove that aspect of the language, from our hockey culture. So much of it now is about that paper trail. If there's no paper trail, and it looks like this is incident one, whereas if it had happened, say it's a tournament and it happens all weekend from Friday night to Sunday afternoon, well, we know if there's a paper trail, we know there's a history of this sort of behavior, and we can be more proactive, not proactive, but properly reactive in addressing it. And that's something that when I talk to officials at our seminars, that this year I am not doing because they're all virtual, but when I talk to them, I speak heavily about the importance of documenting things that happen on the ice, because that's the only way that administrators can know what's going on and respond to what has taken place.
I think
And also, Matt, I'll also say, oh, Pat, did I cut you off? I'm sorry.
Stephanie.
Woman's
Just real
prerogative.
quick to just piggyback on some of the things that you said. I'll also just slip in there that definitely pay attention to the little nuances that are going on with players on the ice. I think that within hockey, one of the things I've noticed that everybody on the ice has a really good grasp of details. And I think that when you look at the body language and when you can somewhat see the facial expressions and see those small idiosyncrasies of what is going on with a particular player that is either dishing out some of this hateful language or the player that is receiving it, I think that that too could be an amazing indicator that there's something going on. And I would think that that is just as important as following it up with those steps that Guy just talked about with creating the documentation.
Yep.
And I think I was going to follow up there. I think the documentation is huge. And Guy also touched on working with the coaches. And I think that's a huge part of officiating, frankly. I've coached enough. I haven't been official, which is probably good for everybody. But I've coached enough to know that when you have if you have an incident and an official brings it to you, that you need to handle that. You need to manage that as a coach. And I think that communication from the official to say, hey, here's what I'm dealing with, and here's really what you should be dealing with, because the official can call the penalty, can write the report. That's all good, but that official may never see that team again, right? Where that coach is going to see him after the game, in the locker room, the next day of practice, and so on. So I think that's a huge part of it, because I think, you know, we sometimes, I think, miss that, and I think the officials and the coaches can miss that. And, you know, if there's a chance, I think the vast majority of our coaches would take that opportunity to try and teach and educate their players on what is responsible, good behavior. I mean, I think that's really hopefully why the majority of our coaches are in there. And I think an assist from the official, as Guy mentioned there, to say, hey, coach, here's what's going on. I think the majority of the coaches would take that and do the right thing with it.
Yeah, and I know that there's been a couple of participants that are interested in the numbers a little bit, part of that, so I can share that through the game reporting system. This past season, we had roughly about 550 incidents that we reported. And that's fairly similar to the year before. I think we were at 570 the previous season. But keep in mind, our season was also cut a little bit short, you know, at the beginning of March because of COVID-19 and those types of things. Of those, and one of the positive things I think of the directive that came out, or two positive things, is the accuracy of what was being assessed, meaning the proper penalty and identifying what is hateful, discriminatory, or offensive, actually improved. It went up from about 50% last year to 75%, where the proper penalty was being assessed, and identifying what that discriminatory or hateful language is. Because, hey, ref, you suck isn't necessarily hateful, discriminatory. It's offensive. Okay, it's certainly worthy of the appropriate penalty, whether it be a misconduct or a game misconduct, depending upon the situation, but it's not worthy of a match penalty for hateful, discriminatory. So the number of incidences where those penalties were assessed for a game misconduct that wasn't really fit into the spirit of the intent was greatly reduced, and the success rate was improved. The other thing is that prior to the directive, we had 0 reports submitted for incidents that weren't heard but that were reported. You know, where the situation where the referee doesn't hear, or the game official doesn't hear what was said, but it was reported to him that a player or a coach said something. Before the directive, we had 0. After the directive, we had like 25 of those reports. So the awareness that was created, I think, was certainly positive, and is a step in the right direction, recognizing that we still have a long ways to go from all aspects of you know, this particular area in terms of creating the awareness and proper enforcement and just eliminating it from the game altogether. So with that, Stephanie, I think the next thing, just want to touch on is piggybacking off of that is over the last several years, the majority of those incidents haven't necessarily involved race or gender. It's more or less along the sexual orientation side, with over 50% of all the incidents reported dealing with that. And some old timers would probably argue or probably suggest that that's been something that has been maybe culturally accepted more so in hockey as a sport over the years. How do we battle that? How do we change that culture? How do we draw attention not only to the race and ethnicity part of it, but also that sexual orientation and the disability and those things?
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. I think the way we can really help deal with those things is to know that if you are saying things that degrade a person for what they look like, how they identify, some of these things that in a lot of times, a person can't do anything about those things. And if it's hurtful, I think that is how we addressed what is actually hate speech and what isn't. And so if it is in the category of something that is hateful speech, then yes, we have to continue to work to get that out of the culture. And I think, one thing about that, Matt, is when we talk a lot about changing the culture, I've thought about some of that in a very different kind of way, because I think that sometimes whenever you say you have to change the culture, that resonates with some people that, okay, what's here that has created this culture doesn't need to be here anymore, and somebody else needs to come in. And so I like to kind of transform the whole phrase of changing the culture to mean integrating the culture. And whenever you integrate the culture, that means that there are people from all walks of life, all kinds of identifications, all kinds of backgrounds that show up. And if you ever use a term that degrades the way a person shows up, that is hateful. And I think that is where we have to also further educate people that these terms that are sexist, racist, sometimes gender or identifying in a very, very, very hurtful way that may have been playful terms that people banter around with all the time. Today, that has to stop because our culture is becoming more integrated. So we have to teach people and have to educate people on what is showing up, and to know that with what is showing up, you can't say those things. And whether you're saying it in a playful way or not, or whether it's been socially accepted or not, it's not accepted anymore. And so we have to be very, very, very upfront about it. And we also have to be unapologetic about having that thought that these kinds of statements, no matter whether they were accepted before or not, they're not accepted now, and they're not going to be accepted moving forward.